I'm going to call this, it is 6:31. I'm going to call this meeting of the Windsor Southeast Supervisory Union School Board to order. Any,
We have an introduction, Bill.
yes, I know. I was trying to get in touch with Hudson. I was hoping that he would do the introduction if he felt comfortable doing it.
Sure, I can do that.
Okay.
So now,
Yes.
so Mount Escutney School Board appointed a new member on Friday, and we're very pleased to welcome Megan Reed for the remainder of the one-year term. Welcome, Megan.
And we all are very excited to have Megan on board the Mount Escutney School Board. And she will make a wonderful addition. So welcome, Megan.
Thank you.
Any changes, additions to the agenda? Christine?
I just want to add under items for action, the approval of the coordinator of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay. I'm actually going to move that up to A.
Okay.
Because I think that's pretty important.
Yeah.
And exciting.
Very exciting.
Okay. Are there any other additions? Okay. Approval of the minutes. Did everyone have time to read the minutes from last SU meeting?
I did. A motion to approve the minutes of the last session meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Seconded.
That was Rebecca. Who seconded?
Elizabeth.
Okay, Elizabeth. Any discussion about it? Okay. I'm going to go around the room here as best I can. I should probably have a list of names, but I can, I'll make do. Beth Roy?
Aye.
Christine Osgood? Is she?
She's not on the board.
No, I didn't think so. I'm like, Davis?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Colleen?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
And no.
Rebecca?
Rebecca. Okay, thank you. And Megan?
I'm going to abstain as I didn't read it.
Okay. A wise choice. Am I missing anyone as I start my list of school board members?
Yes, Nancy.
Nancy. Oh my goodness, Nancy. I see you're in person. Now I really feel guilty. Goodness. Okay. The ayes have it. And we're going to move on to public participation. Public comment is not legally required, but we believe it is crucial for us to hear from our community members about their concerns over issues. Through these meetings, our board models for our students how to conduct public discourse, and that the board and members of our community can approach controversial issues in a civil and constructive manner and can demonstrate mutual respect. Having said that, please note that the board is here to listen. The public comment period is not designed for discussion. Please start by identifying yourself and what town you reside in. Do we have any public participation? Hearing none, we are going to move on to the administrative reports.
All right. Can you hear us?
Yeah, you kind of fade out there for a second.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think he's awesome. Is that better?
Yes.
Weird. Okay, well, I'm gonna get us started and then hand over to Angie and then Brittany. So we have a shared report tonight. Let me share my screen. Comes. All right, we'll get started. So I don't know if any of you took the survey, but we did put out a survey for parent-teacher conferences, and we had a pretty strong response. We had more than 122, I thought. Whoops! Goodness, sorry about that. I'm going to click on it so you can see the results.
I can't read that.
It'll come up. Let me just share this tab instead. Give me 1 second. Takes a second to load. Thank you for your patience while it loads.
I didn't bring mine either, Nancy. I didn't know you could make it bigger. I thought it was too.
I could. I can make it bigger, Nancy. Don't you worry. Hold on a minute.
There we go.
Okay.
That's how
Let's see if
it
this works. Come on. Okay. So I can make it a little bit bigger on the screen too. Okay. So we had 137 responses, which is pretty good.
How did those responses correspond with the proportion of schools?
You know what? I
Like
didn't
is
think I
that
did not. Yep.
9.6%?
9.5 is Albert Bridge.
And is that proportional to?
Oh, I would guess. I didn't figure out the math, but it's got to be pretty close. Yeah. So we had a really good response. In general, more responses for pre-K 5, which we have more pre-K 5 kids, so that makes sense. Did the format of the conference meet your needs? 88.3% said yes, and 11% said no. There were a few comments about, there was opportunity for comment. I don't have the comments for you tonight because I want the staff to get those first. They haven't had a chance. Did the times offered for conferences meet your needs? 94.2% said yes. I think anything over 85 is pretty good. So we're pleased with that. I think teachers are trying to be really accommodating, and with the remote option, it really does help actually a lot of parents. So that works. Did the content of the conference, assessment data, information on how your child is performing on standards help you gain an understanding of how your child is doing in academic areas? 91.2% said yes, 8.8 no. Did you leave the conference feeling like you had a good understanding of where your child is at academically, socially, emotionally, and behaviorally? We did a scale there, and so roughly more than 80% in the 3s and 4s, which is good. This one I was curious about. Did you leave the conference with concrete strategies on how to support your child? Because most parents want to know what they can do at home. 84.7 said yes, and 15.3 said no. So we've got some work to do there. I think, and that was the last question. There were, again, comments. I think Brittany's going to talk a little bit about some of the data things that we're going to be doing, which is really going to give parents some concrete examples of where their kids are at and what they can do to support them at home. So we're excited about that. So I was thrilled that we had such a good response on that survey. Okay, go back to the screen. We had John Broderick last Monday come and speak. This was a collaboration between Mount Ascutney, Paul Voldemar at Trinity Church, I'll say his name wrong, and the
Faulkner.
school. Yes.
Mhm.
He had seen John speak and brought him to us, and John came to speak to us. He does that free of charge. He comes, he tells his story, which is about his own family, his own child's struggle with mental health, and how he has really spent the last 7 years speaking to kids and adults all over the Northeast. And he had some really sound advice for us around social emotional learning and what he thinks we can do to address some of the mental health crisis that we're dealing with. And he was really practical, and he said, get devices out of the hands of children. You learn social emotional learning face to face by talking to each other. And he recognizes that would be a very big ask, but are there ways we can limit it? And I think at a recent meeting, a community member suggested no cell phones in school. So we'll talk about that. He said one of the biggest things that is plaguing kids is they're overscheduled. Kids today are overscheduled. He said his advice is, kids at, especially middle and younger, shouldn't be on traveling teams. They should play on teams, but they shouldn't be on buses for 2 hours to get to a place to play a game. They have a lot on their plates and they're really stressed out. He also made a comment about grading, where it's changed. So parents have immediate access to how students are doing. And that is really stressful on kids because they don't have a chance to actually, go and see the teacher and work on things before their parents who have very good intentions and want to support their kids and want to see them succeed. That causes angst with kids and stress. So, and we do that. It was like an aha moment. I was like, oh my God, we do that. So it was a really good speech that night, talk. He's a very good presenter. We didn't get a big turnout, which he said happens all over the place. I mean, he said, Christine will be lucky if we get 4. We got 7 that night, but he also had an opportunity to speak to the kids during the day, which was good. So yeah, so it was good. And he suggested that we consider showing a film called Chasing Childhood, which Melanie Sheehan from Mount Escutney and I are going to meet and talk about. It would be a public viewing. There's a cost to it, but it talks about these issues. So just wanted to update you
So
on
you
that.
only had a turnout of 7 folks.
7 adults, yeah,
7 adults.
yeah, which is what we struggle with.
And that, at a time when mental health is a really big
Yeah.
issue with our kids right now.
Yeah.
With that,
Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to briefly let you know, we had the administrators, we were able to bring in the VPA. They do a lot of leadership training, and they model it from the Center of Creative Leadership.
What is VPA?
Vermont Principals Association, I'm sorry.
Thank
I
you.
gotta be careful with my acronyms. So, so the administrator spent today in this room, you might notice the familiar scenery. And we had a professional development opportunity to help us develop our leadership skills. And the workshop was called Better Conversations Every Day. And some of the things we practiced were listening to understand, asking powerful questions, asking challenging and supportive questions, and setting up accountability systems to help us move these skills forward in our practice, because we know that they will help improve the cultures in our schools. So it was one of the principals said it was one of the best trainings she'd been at. So it was it's hard to be out for the day when you're an administrator, but it was worth it. So, and then I just wanted to update you on where we're at with educational equity. The audit is complete. Angie and I met with one of the consultants from Insight for just an overview of the results. We then met with Mary Gannon, our educational consultant, to take a preliminary look and to figure out how we're going to roll it out to staff and how we're going to unpack it with the board. And we talked briefly about maybe summer retreat would be a good time for that. So, so we'll get that prepared. And then I am so pleased to present our our coordinator of diversity, equity, and inclusion. She signed her contract today, so
Oh,
I
good.
can share tonight. Tracy Price is coming to us from Portland. She's got a BA in psychology from the University of Vermont and a Master of Arts from the University of Maryland College. She has worked as an educational director. She worked for the Gray Family Foundation, which was an environmental literacy program, as a coordinator. She worked for the North American Association for Environmental Education. So she's been in teaching roles, which is great. She's been in systems. And then she's worked for the Center for Diversity and the Environment as a consultant in Portland, Oregon. She's worked for the Multicultural Collaborative as a consultant, and for the Center for Equity and Inclusion as a senior equity and inclusion consultant. So she comes to us with a wealth of experience, and she's going to be wonderful. So I'll ask for that approval later on in the meeting, but thrilled to get her. Thrilled to get her. She's going to be just great. And full-time.
When did she start?
So she's got a flexible start date because she's moving across the country, but she'll be in place by August 1st at the latest.
Oh, it
So-
is in Port Mill, Maine.
No,
That's
Oh,
all the way across the country, and
Oh, wow.
so they have to find housing, and yeah, so. Okay, the quarterly report, of course Larry walked out the door. So the good news is, we are in the black, as you can see. And the early childhood fund has got a balance of $1,800, which is great. We're kind of right on target there. Food services is in the red a bit, and that is due to the cost of food. And those, if you remember the support staff contract that was negotiated after the budget. So there's some increase there, but overall, we're doing well. And if you have any specific questions, the man has arrived. You can look at it, certainly.
And these were put on the board portal on
It's in
April
the,
17th.
yeah.
When we talk about the cost of food, I know that I keep hearing that it's going up, and I know it's
Yeah.
go shopping, so that's
Yeah.
obvious.
Yeah.
What are we looking at there, Larry?
So out of the 110,000, roughly 117,000, that food is in the red. Half of that, roughly 50,000, is the food, which you'll see on the revenue side. You will get some of that
We'll
back
get some of that.
later. Remember, it's the third quarter, not the fourth quarter.
Okay.
And the other half is, remember when we built the budget in October and November of 21, right? For fiscal year 23, which is where we are now.
Mhm, mhm.
That was before
Oh,
the negotiated settlement with the support staff, which was a more generous increase to bring them up to other like positions in the Upper Valley.
Mhm.
So there's no new FTEs, so half of it is food and the other half is the raise. The negotiated settlement
And we will get some back on the revenue side for the food.
for the food,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, the only other thing under my report, which is not on there, is students on the school boards, because Heartland and Weathersfield have, they're going to do it. They're creating a process and, determining which kids, so it'll happen, just hasn't happened yet.
Bill has his hand up.
Oh, Bill has his hand up. Sorry, Bill.
Oh, I'm
Yes.
just flexing my hand. But are we talking about students on the SU school board or the local school boards?
Local at this point, I
Okay.
think, and there was talk of, would one of those, I think this happened, would one of those students come to an SU board on a rotating basis? Do I have that right?
What I recall is that we had wanted the local districts to go through their process, decide whether they wanted to, and then get students onto their boards. And once that had happened, we were gonna move forward and kind of figure out what it would look like to bring students up every once in a while, or,
Okay,
David, Davis's perception is exactly how I remember it. Thank you, Davis.
awesome. So they're working on it. They should have, I think their goal is to have students in place for the fall. They're developing a process for middle school, which is a little bit different than high school, so.
Is that, do we have, I don't know, is it policy or process, something written for that? Because I think, okay,
We have a process, I've shared it with, that we used, Amanda Scott and I've shared it with the principals at those schools,
okay.
but they're tweaking it to make it's similar, but All right, and I'm going to turn the screen over to Angie, who is going to deliver the curriculum and instruction report.
I'm not sure I did that right. We'll see. It might be showing my presentation.
Yes, please eat those.
These are famous.
Oh, thank you.
I can't seem to click on share a tab.
Cookies to the left of me, cookies to the right.
Rebecca needed some for her husband, so she made a few extra.
I can't smell them because I want them.
I'm
so
sorry.
it's-
Angie's in no sugar right now.
I'm,
Oh.
yeah, I try to avoid sugar. and-
That is really too bad.
Tell me about it. Is that good now? Hi, everyone. We are looking at the future, looking back at 22-23 work in CIA. We are far from over for the end of the year, but we will be sharing with you some of our wins this year as we look forward to the last 8 weeks of school. So, just a second, let me get this. This little tiny screen. So this might look exactly like the fall presentation, which I doubt you remember, but it is. I thought I'd use the same format. So I'm gonna talk about these things, and this will be important. I'll share this on the curriculum website so that anybody that is joining us in the recording can find this on the CIA website. So the first thing I want to talk about is the curriculum work that we had slated in the fall. And the remote work across the supervisory union didn't serve our faculty very well at all. And they were quite overwhelmed with it and requested, I think it was early October, if we could do this in a different way. So what we landed on was that they would opt for release time, so I could bring teams of teachers to the SU for release time for projects. That in and of itself also presented its own challenges in terms of getting people out of the classroom and having substitutes. The Unified Arts team did determine that they wanted to continue to work, and they have been meeting a few times, 2 to 3 times a month since. The work that will be completed by the end of the year is the alignment project for our learning expectations. This is also, you might hear this referred to as transferable skills, but because we have our portrait of graduate competencies and our Leader in Me 7 habits, we want to align the language in our transferable skills in our learning expectations to these 2 things. And then the proficiency-based work is going to be moved into the summer so that we can have that completed or have it started so that we can complete it throughout the year in FY24. One of the things that you're going to hear Patty Gray, who is remote, talk about in a little bit is the curriculum adoption process for our ELA and math programs. So I thought I would share with you a little bit about that process. Phase 1 is the research and review process. Then we pilot programs. We select the pilots that we are going to do. And then we actually conduct a pilot. And then it's the adoption and implementation phase if they decide that they want to move forward with the pilot. Of course, if the pilot doesn't move forward, then it's a reiterative process, and we've had that as well in recent years with our, we did that with ExactPath. We piloted it, then we had the first year of adoption, and then we decided that it wasn't working for us. So we went back to the table, and we have since adopted the STAR assessment for that. Yes, Elizabeth?
I was gonna bring this up later in our agenda, would you rather I ask questions about this now or wait until later?
If you want me to get through the whole process, I'll describe the phases, and then if you wanna ask questions, that would probably flow nicer.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna tell you a little bit about each phase. The research and review phase, we look at best instructional practices related to the content area. We look at potential programs, we solicit suggestions from the experts, from other districts, and from teachers as appropriate. We conduct an internal review of the programs that we're currently using. And then we convene a committee and we talk with the ad team about the adoption timeline. So that's the research and review phase. The second phase is the actual selection of programs to pilot. So we convene a committee, they generate a list of the critical components, what is important to us, and then they review proposed programs to answer the following questions. Does the program meet our goals, looking at our strategic plan? Does it meet the proficiency standards? Does it align, in other words, does it align with what we have for proficiencies and what the Agency of Education says that we have to have in our curriculum? Does the program contain the critical components identified by the committee? Does the program provide support or support explicit instructions so that not only are there demonstration lessons, guided practice, collaboration, and independent work? Is the program equitable, anti-racist, culturally responsible, anti-discriminating, and inclusive? That language comes directly from the current draft of the Education Quality Standards. And then finally, does it align with the other content areas? Excuse me. And thirdly, we summarize the committee's findings and make a final recommendation regarding whether or not whether and what we are going to pilot. So the decision is made and then shared. So finally, during the adoption and implementation phase, we plan what the implementation is going to look like, including how teachers will be supported and what training will be included. We implement the program, and then we provide ongoing support for teachers and administrators in the use of the program. Other things that we need to consider in the whole process, and you may have noticed that the parent and student involvement piece I missed that. That should also be in the adoption phase. Once we adopt something, once we pilot something, we're gonna wanna get student and parent feedback, and Patty will talk a little bit more about how she's doing that with our two recent pilots. So we wanna make sure that we have intervention resources as part of the full pilot, so we get a sense of how we support our struggling learners, and also our learners who are maybe functioning beyond grade level. That's just as important. We wanna know how we're gonna budget for the pilot. We want a discussion about piloting more than one program. When the committee is unable to narrow the choice, we would want to look at more than one program. That is often the case when you're piloting. That Patty will address that more when she talks about that choice in the two current programs. And then we want to consider the budgetary impact and the long-term sustainability. If anything, what we're finding is that during our last curriculum adoption phase in 2015, those were open source programs. And yes, there was a cost associated with getting teacher manuals and things like that. But for math, for example, we had the teacher manuals, and those were used probably 2 or 3 years, and then teachers just started copying everything. So they'd spend hours at the copier copying everything. The new programs that we're looking at, everything is purchased. So workbooks, teacher manuals, additional supplemental materials, that's all purchased. And it's a large budget impact, has a large budgetary impact. We want to make sure that assessment is part of our plan. And then the test pilot design, we want to ensure that teachers are getting a broad enough view of the pilot so they can determine if it's going to work for us. And then a full pilot includes the implementation plan, the ways that the program will be supported in the classroom specifically, because you want the program to be successful, so we are going to support our teachers in a way that is sustainable and meaningful for them. Other priorities in the CIA office has been instructional leadership, Leader in Me implementation, and our work with Mike Nicholson on self-determined learning. I have some exciting news to report for that. So for instructional leadership this year, we were gonna, last fall I talked about doing inquiry cycles with the principals, and what we have found works best with the principals is meeting, Christine and I meet together with them. We look at any issues that they may be having. We talk about, we try to solve those problems together. Then we are we're going around and looking at instruction. We're going into the classrooms. We collect data on student agency, and then we look at the data together and say, what's working, what's not working, and how can we address what's not working. The emphasis is really on the data and also on Leader in Me implementation. Leader in Me implementation, we continue to work with our coach, Barb Lintner. In fact, she's coming the third week of May to be in the buildings, in all our buildings, working with teacher teams and other staff as they discuss the deeper implementation of Core 1 and Core 2. We are coordinating the implementation of Leader in Me more so across the buildings than we had in the past. We realized that this was a piece that was necessary if we want our grade level teams to be proceeding in a similar fashion. And we were a little bit all over the place for a while, but we're actually coming together and we have more in common, more things that have been implemented. This also has helped us to figure out where our buildings need support so that we can take full advantage of having the Leader in Me coaches and having the training. So we have one more training, all staff training, and that, K-8 staff training in January for Core 3. And we're looking at the various practices in each of they call it Core 1, 2, and 3. It's really just the phases of development. So the first core, which we got trained in last year, was adult learning. The practices are adult learning and modeling, direct teaching the 7 habits to the students, creating a leadership environment. When you walk into a Leader in Me school, you should get a sense that you are in a Leader in Me school. So we're working on that. We continue to work on that. And then leadership roles in the classroom. And we're also working on leadership roles across the school. So when you walk into school and you're greeted by students who then offer to show you to where you're going or give you a tour of the building, it's so fun, really is. Core 2 is more about setting up that culture of academics and integrating the habits into actually what we're doing on a daily. So it's setting up the student lighthouse teams, which our schools are in various stages of that. Students, I think, have been identified in teams formed in some of the schools, and others they're talking with students about it, and then the work that the students will do will start in the fall. But we have had some Leader Rising events. How do you like that term? Leader Rising events. Where students have actually planned the event. They have support of an adult, but we had a dance April 7th with the 6-8 team that the students organized and planned on their own with the support of their faculty advisor, but the kids did the work. The other piece of Core 2 is student leadership portfolios. This is a portfolio that goes from a description of who the student is to what their wildly important goals are, what their learning opportunities have been. It's really a reflective collection of evidence of what they have done across the year in their academics and in their social emotional learning.
So would that be, when you say what they've done, does that mean that at the end of the year, there's like this Similar to like a capstone where, no,
well,
similar to
the-
like, this is what I've done, this is where I'm at.
The opportunity, the student leadership portfolios, once we get fully rolling on them, and I think you might remember Anna Brooks presented in one of Christine's, one of her reports. Anna Brooks, who's a first grade teacher at Heartland, was talking about doing leadership portfolios with her students. So she started last fall, and students get used to talking about themselves from the perspective of this Leader in Me portfolio. And they present it and they talk about their learning and who they are as a person in their parent-teacher conferences. So I've asked the teams, I have asked the K-5 team and the 6-8 team to imagine student-led conferences in FY24 at the end of March, which is when student conferences are parent conferences are. And you have your students very comfortable talking about their leadership portfolio in some fashion. And then I'd ask them to backward plan. What has to be in place in order for our students to feel confident that they can talk about themselves in a conference to their parents, to the people that care the most about them. And so that's what we've been doing with the teams.
And that's a goal for all students.
That's a goal for all
Parent-teacher
students, yes.
conferences. Okay.
Core 3 is gonna talk more about its student-led conferences. So in January, we'll learn more about the ins and outs of student-led conferences. Heartland's been doing student-led conferences for years. So, but what they haven't had is that portfolio. So they'll have that portfolio in there to help guide the conference. I remember when we did them years ago, it was like, well, now we have to train the kids to talk about it. So it was like, well, this is a test that I did for English. This was a report on social studies, and there was no depth to the conversation. The leadership portfolios provide that structure for students to then be able to really talk about who they are as a learner, as a leader, as a person. So the core
Okay.
3.
Angie, I just want to point out to the board that we're coming up on 35 minutes. And I want to make sure that we have enough time for Brittany to do her data report, anything left that Larry wants to go over, and that we have enough time for board discussion and board action. So I just want to point that out.
Thank you. Self-determined learning, the big news with self-determined learning is that we brought this team to the ASCD and the Self-Determined Learning Summit at the end of March. And we are going to be meeting on May 5th when Mike Nicholson is here to talk about how we're going to use that learning and move our system forward with self-determined learning. I have a whole presentation here about grants management and our CFP monitoring, which I will not get into. The biggest things about the monitoring for title, I've been the grants manager for 6 years. This is the first time I've experienced the monitoring, is that we just have to tighten up the ways that we communicate and involve our families in the process of writing our plans and reviewing our plans. Those are the big takeaways for that. Of course, there's a little bit more information on that. And if you have questions, please reach out to me and I'm happy to talk about that.
I've got a quick question. On CFP monitoring, it says McKinney-Vento homeless communication. What does that mean?
So McKinney-Vento there is funding in the Consolidated Federal Program Grant. And there is certain communication about what we do to support students who are experiencing homelessness. So those, like, for example, there's information posters that we're supposed to have posted all over in public places, at like hospital bulletin boards around the community, and we don't have that. So we have to work on generating a flyer and then getting them posted out across all of our communities, so that people know how to access that information, that support, and also we'll put it on our website. Okay.
Brittany?
So then this is Brittany's data presentation.
Oh, nice.
Thanks.
Okay,
Excuse me a second. Then Patty will talk about the, after Brittany's done talking, Patty will give you a little update on the pilots. Sorry, Brittany.
Okay.
Just tell me when to.
So I just wanted to let you know about Frontline. That's something we adopted, Frontline Professional Growth last year. And this year, as a result, we were able to offer 48 different learning opportunities for our staff in-house throughout the school year. We had 48 requests come through for courses for credit and 60 requests for workshops and things like that. So that was pretty exciting that we were able to access all of that information and provide all those learning opportunities. We can go to the next slide. The next couple slides that you're gonna see are all from EduClimber. EduClimber we adopted recently, actually, and we've been setting it up. It is going to be our new data warehouse in place of Performance Matters. There's a lot of different components to it. We're able to easily sync all of our data in, and it creates all of these beautiful charts for me, so I don't have to do it in spreadsheets anymore, which makes myself very happy. And then we will be using it primarily for one, our SU data reports, two, supporting equity and inclusion work. We can run all of the reports in one system. Reporting our grants and our strategic plan and leader and meet goals. Next year, we hope to use EduClimber. Our interventionists can go in and assign students interventions and then do progress monitoring directly in the system and see all the data in one shot. And then after that, we'll use it for all of our MTSS documentation with all staff. So it's pretty exciting. So I divided this up into our different strategic plan goals. So we're going to start with student success and engagement. You can go next. The first chart is about our average daily attendance. So that's one that I report out on every time I report. There are two different categories that get run in EduClimber. One is the orange one, which is coming over directly from PowerSchool. That's just saying, were the students in the building or not at some point in time. The other one I actually like better because it actually analyzes the data in terms of by period. So if a student was late, it counts against them being in school for that rate. If they, missed out on they were on a field trip, if they missed out on something in class, it's just all things taking away from class time, which is also really important. So I compared both on here. You can go to the next slide. So our Track My Progress, this is the growth rates from winter to winter. I've reported on this before, and an average growth rate would be 1.0. So we are hovering right around that for the most part. It has kind of averaged out compared to during that first time when we were back from COVID, where we had this massive growth. Awesome to see, and now we're kind of evening out, which is also okay. Next.
Whoa, wait, hold,
Yes.
go back there for a second.
Yeah.
We're missing,
Great.
there's something glaring on here. How do we account for the negative growth in math and the extreme growth in ELA in 8th grade?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have an answer to that right now. I think one thing that makes that analysis really tricky is the curriculum piece. I think once we have a very common and consistent curriculum, we're better going to be able to see what, factor out some of those things. But right now, it's a little all over the place. So it's hard to really pinpoint the why of some of these things.
Aren't we changing the math curriculum?
We're updating the math curriculum. Yes.
So okay, and then you were moving from one to another because.
We have Eureka and we are updating it to the newest version of Eureka. So it's not a new curriculum per se, but certainly, it's definitely more aligned with research-based things like that, it's really provides more resources, just up to date. I mean, we've had Eureka for quite some time now.
2015.
Yeah.
It's a major
been a long
update.
time. It's a major update.
The last time,
Christine? Christine, is everyone else unable to hear Christine? Okay, yeah. I was looking at other people's faces, and Nicole and Katie are very good at projecting their feelings.
Oh, sorry, I can be louder, Bill.
Is that
I
better?
apologize.
Can you hear now?
Yeah, okay, I'll be louder.
To turn it up.
Okay, so this report came from EduClimber, and basically this took in all of our Track My Progress data, and I was allowed to set a goal, so it'll track your goals automatically that you set in there. The goal for Leader in Me that we had was 79% of our students would be average or high on the Track My Progress, so this is where we fell. And you can see that gap is closing a little bit every single time, so that's pretty exciting. I did not put the math goal on there because I also wanted to see a report of what it would look like if you saw everything, instead of just the highs and average. And one thing that's kind of neat with EduClimber is if I were in the system and I hovered over these, you could select them and it'll drill down even further into each category. So if I selected the green for the winter data, it'll go in and show you the students in the green. You can assign them to interventions and so on and so forth. So it's kind of neat. Next. I was asked to report the middle level survey data, which I did before. Do you feel like you have control over what or how you're learning? I want to explain this one really quickly. So it's divided by school district, and the plus or minus, the little numbers at the top above each one, shows the comparison to the first time that we took the assessment. So this is so HES, 68% of them said sometimes, which is 10% higher than the last time we gave this assessment. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Next slide. Culture and wellness. This is our panorama data. I know it's super duper small, but I know you're going to be given this slideshow. So this just kind of shows where things fell in terms of social emotional regulation reported by the students, as well as well-being and challenging feelings value. Incidents by month. So as you know, we have a new system called MBA, behavior logging in PowerSchool. EduClimber also pulls in all of that data, so you can see that right along with your academic data. And you can see kind of the trend. I mean, the dip really kind of makes sense. We had a lot of breaks in December and February. However, January stayed low and we didn't have breaks. So, and then it went slightly up, and this was run as of, April 5th.
That's why April's so low.
Yeah.
It wasn't over.
Yep. This is our HHB substantiated cases also logged. Yes.
What's HHB?
Harassment, hazing, and bullying.
Thank you.
Yep. So all substantiated cases. And again, in EduClimber, if I were to click on any one of those little numbers, it would drill down for me and kind of give me more details about all of those in every school.
This is across the
Whole use. Yep. Across the whole.
Student reported or teacher reported or?
It's a combination of both. It's substantiated, meaning they were investigated and found to have occurred. Yep. Next. I just wanted to give a quick update on assessments. So we are adopting Renaissance Star, which is really, really exciting. It is going to replace Track My Progress and Foxton Hill for the upcoming school year. Both, Track My Progress really needed to be updated in terms of what we were getting for it was not what we needed anymore. We really needed Star, which drills down into things. It gets all the way down into the standards. It gives the amount of reports it gives is phenomenal. And F&P really does not align with the science of reading. So we wanted a system that kind of did both, and STAR does that, which is great. It also gives family reports, and there is potential that they have a parent portal that would be a way. So once we get used to the reports and we get used to interpreting them as a teaching staff, hopefully we'll be able to roll that out to parents. EduClimber is also in beta testing for a parent portal as well. So that would be all data, not just STAR. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to move quickly. For Bill, VTCAP is coming up. We're starting tomorrow, and I love our timeline actually because all the other schools got to go first, and I got all the little tips and tricks on what went well and what did not. So hopefully it'll go a little bit smoother for us. And that's just a repeat of the EduClimber information that I kind of already went through.
What is VTCAP?
The Vermont State testing that it used to be SBACs.
Yes. Is that the shorter ones?
It is not shorter.
Not shorter.
They said that, and it is not.
They just announced it a few months ago.
Yes.
That's the one that's also giving, a lot of people have a lot of complaints about.
It was
And a
in-
lot of stress. Yes,
And a lot
that's
of-
accurate.
It was in the Valley News and the Vermont Daily.
Yes, yes. So, but we are gonna do okay, I think. I think it'll.
Circle of
work.
control.
Circle of control, I do my circle of control.
Yep.
And this is just a list of some of the summer projects that I'll be working on. We're very, very much focused on trying to hold on to the new staff that we get by providing a lot more support including a Google Classroom, an onboarding, a better onboarding process, a website that has kind of all the need to knows right in there, and supporting and coaching. We have an MTSS Teams where we're going to be merging special education and our MTSS coordinators together, which is really exciting. That'll be some work that we're doing this summer, and then a lot of setup and customization for EduClimber so that we can get that moving. Yeah, Davis.
Can you just go a little bit more into what exactly has changed in onboarding in the coming year, like what you're looking
Yeah,
for?
so I think part of it is with Frontline that has helped a lot. So just a very simple thing is communication across all the different people that need to know when somebody new gets onboarded. So Tina now puts it in the system as soon as an email is created. I get an email, Ryan Dower gets an email, and we can set them up in all of the other systems, testing systems, whatever it might be, right away. Make sure they get computers, things along those lines. We are all the paperwork's in there. We have the possibility of doing training and kind of some of those essential trainings really early on in the hiring process so that we don't have to bombard them with that right before school starts when they need to be learning other important things like curriculum and stuff like that. We have a timeline set up so that they can get all of that information over time instead of right before school starts, which is a big complaint. We have a variety of different options for support, coaching, principals, all of these things were happening and now we're systematizing them. So that we make sure that all of the information gets communicated really clearly.
Do you still do mentoring?
Yep, we do. Yep, that's part of it. That's part of the coaching piece of that. We're gonna do, the principals will have a staggered meeting with all new staff for the first several months of school. The mentors, we're assigning everybody a buddy this year, which is just a simple, like, stop in and give them a cup of coffee. Something just make them feel welcome. Coaching, there's one other piece to that. What am I missing?
Instructional coaches?
Instructional coaches, yes, instructional coaches, that was the fourth. And then their teams. So we'll make sure that each one of those people have a list of all the things that they're supposed to cover with new staff and a timeline to do so.
Awesome, thanks.
No problem.
Is that it, Brittany?
I think that's it.
Wanna jump
I don't know,
in
that was a
anything else on
lot.
that slide?
No, I think I covered it.
Okay,
all.
great.
We're good.
So now, Patty, if you want to, come on.
Yeah, sure. You can skip to the next one, Angie, and I'll be really brief. I know you have a lot of other things to cover. So I know you heard about the Eureka Math Squared pilot back in the fall. We've had a really successful year with the pilot. It had some bumps, mostly with technology at the beginning. And so the bottom line is the pilot committee is recommending adoption. And so that decision will go to Ad Team tomorrow. This is a little cart before the horse because I'm actually talking to the Ad Team tomorrow about it. But that is the recommendation. And we've collected feedback. We're currently collecting feedback from parents and students. And it's been very positive, all of the feedback that we've gotten. And again, this is an updated program from the original Eureka. It is much more aligned with UDL practices, diversity and equity practices. And so we're very hopeful that this will roll out really, really well. And we're planning supports for teachers for next year in terms of training and ongoing supports during the school year. Angie, you can skip to the next if you don't mind. And then also we are running an ELA pilot. We went through all of that process that Angie outlined earlier. We identified ELA as being a need because we've had a very unequitable system for ELA within our SU. And so we started looking at that earlier in the year. We did the research, we convened the committee. The committee looked at the research for best practices and science of reading, and identified, I had done some research on programs that are highly regarded and are aligned with all of the criteria that we were looking at. And I brought those to the pilot team, and they decided to pilot one program. which was the Amplify CKLA at the K-5 level, and then Amplify ELA at the 6-8 level. And then we had our regular meetings and support in the classroom while teachers were teaching it and implementing it. And the K-5 CKLA has been a very positive experience. The parent feedback is also very positive. We had, unfortunately, we started with 2 teachers at the 6-8 level piloting the ELA program, and we had 1 dropout, unfortunately. So we had insufficient evidence and experience with the 6-8 ELA to move that program forward to Add Team as a recommendation. So we will not be moving that one forward, but we will be moving the K-5 CKLA forward to Add Team tomorrow. And they will make the final decision as to what we do with both the Eureka Squared and the Amplify CKLA. And then this is just outlines the summer work that I need to get done in terms of if we do move forward with adoption, the purchasing, organizing, delivering, being available for teachers over the summer at different times so they have someone supporting them and becoming familiar with the materials, and then planning the trainings for both programs, and creating a system of support during next year in both working with instructional coaches and interventionists and team leaders so that we have a successful rollout. And that's it. Thanks, Angie.
So I just want to say thank you. I think every department head probably says this, but I do have the best team in the SU. Brittany and Patty get the work done, and we make a great team. So thank you.
May I ask a couple of questions? Okay.
Well, I guess that's up to Bill.
I don't know where Bill went.
Bill, may I ask?
Yes. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry, Angie, I'm gonna go back. I didn't have a chance to ask you
okay.
questions. But what are the 7 habits in Leader in Me?
Be proactive. Begin with mind.
First things first.
Synergize, put first things first.
Speak first to understand.
Speak first to understand.
What does synergize mean?
Synergize means you take care of your own, synergize means working together, that energy. And then sharpening the saw is about really taking care of yourself.
Practicing skills, that's what that's what the phrase implies, supposed to imply.
Is there any environment in which we use less violent language than sharpening the saw? No.
I mean, that's the term that's used, I don't know.
It's often equated with balance, taking care of yourself, your emotional needs, your physical needs, your.
Sharpening the saw?
Yeah.
Okay. How is the Leader in Me program, and just in what you were talking about today, the leadership portfolio, how is it altered for neurodivergent students?
I would think, that would be, the portfolio is for the student. So however the student chooses to represent themselves, not only there's paper, but there's also a digital version where they can use a variety of media to represent their learning, who they are as a person, their goals. And it would be just like any other project that a student could be supported with how they show who they are.
So I guess what I apologize for constantly questioning the Leader in Me program, but I constantly have questions about the Leader in Me program. And I don't know that, or I don't, what happens when a student doesn't want to be a leader?
It's leadership. So it's not necessarily a leader like we're school board leaders, right? You guys are school board leaders. I'm a curriculum leader. It's not necessarily I'm a leader out in front of other people. I'm leading myself. So it's not that a student has to like stand up in front of the class and go and out into the community and say, I'm leading the group. It's not necessarily that. It's personal leadership, personal responsibility. That's what it means to be a leader. We
I
talk
don't-
about
I don't know if Katie's going to jump into this as well, but I think it's important to point out that Leader in Me, from what I understand it, isn't just teaching leadership skills. It's a social emotional training curriculum as well. So
It
I
is.
think that's important to point out. Katie?
Okay, then and if it is a social and emotional curriculum, how does it dovetail with CPS, the collaborative problem solving?
Seek first to understand is collaborative problem solving. It's listening to the other person and also stating your concerns. So that's the one habit that really comes to mind, being proactive.
Advocating for yourself
Yeah.
is a huge piece to that.
I think one thing that I
Hold on, Davis. Katie had something to add.
I think Angie nailed it, and with both responses to Elizabeth's question. And I can say from watching this work in conjunction with students developing their own learning that are incredibly neurodivergent, and how they each take their own unique approach to it within whole class lessons, within individual lessons, within just individual process, conversations. It's highly adaptable to each student, and I think that that's where we're seeing it on an individual basis all the time. So that was my only 2 cents to add to what Angie said.
Thank you, Katie. Davis?
One of the paradigms is everybody is a leader. Everybody can be a leader. That's one of the paradigms.
Sure. Yeah, and actually, Andrew, that's kind of what I was going to throw out there. And I understand, Elizabeth, where kind of the initial question came from too, because I think that this program, and really a lot of the discourse around the way that we conceptualize leadership, the mental model has shifted in that conversation from being leadership in a hierarchical sense, where like the leaders are the people near the top of the hierarchy, to a concept of shared leadership or personal leadership. So I think it can be tough because we have this cultural concept of what leader means, whereas in this kind of new mental model of it, leadership is more about self-actualization and ownership over your own behaviors and like building knowledge, skills, and attitudes to own that agency. That's the best way I understand it. And as much as I'll admit I think my skepticism around programs like this mostly has to come with I think it can be rough when you're making leadership seem like a proprietary thing. Although I think that this framework, what I've seen of it, it's definitely dulled some of my skepticisms of it. It seems like there's been a lot of really good outcomes so far from what I've seen. But yeah, it reflects what you see in a lot of professional organizational culture now too. So I think that that's a good thing to familiarize students who are moving into all different areas of the workforce with, at younger ages, because it's definitely accessible to very young students.
So Elizabeth's question here gives me to a good transition point towards discussion. And as we start the discussion section, I want to point out one of the reasons I highlighted time, and that's because I realize that the administrators have a lot of things to share, and everything that they're sharing is extremely important and very fascinating. At the same time, things like what Elizabeth asks are also extremely important for the development of board understanding and community understanding. And so that, coming from a history of really leadership through verbiage that this SU has struggled with in the past several years. I'd like to have that time for board business opportunities for interaction and discussion within the administrative reports, as well as time for items of discussion and items for action. So that's why I brought it up. My goal is not to make sure that, you rush through anything, but if you're given a certain amount of time, think about, how much you can actually present in a useful meeting. With that, I'm going to be quiet and we're going to go on. Windsor Southeast supervisor employees living in an SU town, bringing children to the school in the district where they work.
I can just refresh what I brought to the board last month, I think it was. And the legal advice would be, this could still raise a claim of unfair practice. As you remember, the advice was not to let parents who lived in other towns bring their children to our school. The lawyer said it's less complicated, but he still recommends that there could be some challenges to that, and I want to be really open and honest about those. So if you are a staff member and you live in Windsor, but you work in Heartland, the ask is, can you bring your child to Heartland with you to work? Which would be a lovely benefit, to be honest with you. I taught in the school my kids went to, and it was just a special time. But I lived in the town, so there wasn't that. So you need to know that, yes, our special education costs are at the SU level, so that is not an issue. But our 504 costs and accommodations, and there are costs for 504s, are local. Those come out of local budgets. And there are also occasions when we have students who need additional supports. We try not to go this route, but we have done it. As a principal, I did it. There were students who needed one-on-one support staff members without being on an IEP, and those costs are local. So you just need to know kind of some of the things that could happen if you open up the SU to this. And I do call it a benefit. I think it is a benefit for some people. But the choice is up to you. I think in Hartford, Bill, maybe you can speak to this. I think it's allowed, but there's a approval process, I believe.
Yeah. And I think this is definitely something that we could investigate, but take it rather slow. Because one reason I say this is because we already have a policy in place for parents to apply. And even though they're not employees, and of course the final decision is up to the principal and then up to the superintendent, but we do allow other people to apply. And so I think there's a possibility to work through this, but it's not something that we're going to get finished before the next contract negotiation. And I think it would probably have to be part of that contract if it is going to be considered a benefit. So most likely we have a 2 or 3 year window to kind of look at this. At the same time, these parents who are staff members still can apply through the normal process of a parent if there is a need, but it can't be based upon because they're a staff member. Anyone else have discussions on this?
Well, I think that, Christine, you had mentioned that we really only had like 2 or 3 cases. Or were we looking at a larger number?
It's going to be dependent on the year, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's a fluid number. I think there's probably more than 2 or 3. I don't think I've done the math on it. It was more of a consideration of the first ask, letting staff who live in other communities to be able to bring their children to work with them. And that's a hard no. So we're not going to do that. So this was this hasn't come up from staff, to be honest with you. This was just a follow-up question with the legal counsel. So I don't think it's a huge concern right now, and I think taking time and working through it is a good idea.
Yeah, I would agree with what.
Colleen? Colleen has her hand up. I'd like to give her a chance.
So from, just so I'm sure I understand, so from outside of our district, no longer, that's not on the table. If it ever was, I don't know if it was. But within our district, we already have kind of a process in place. I'm just kind of saying what Bill just said, but clarifying for myself. How long, my hands up for how long is that window of time between now and negotiations?
4 years. Is that right, Christine? We got, next year is the last year of their contract.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So we'd be negotiating for 2026, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Versus 2024.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next year's 23, 24. It'll be 25. Yeah.
25, yes.
25.
School year SY 26 instead of next year, which is SY 25.
Yeah.
Okay.
SY means school year. I'm trying to help with the acronyms.
Yeah.
That's one.
Yeah, so we'll just continue to investigate and keep it on the table. I'll put it on the negotiations list, Bill.
As a parent who I was allowed to do that. When I worked at Pomfret, it was a agreement for that individual district to allow them to come. And that was nothing that was written in the contract, nothing official, but they allowed it because the cost to the school was not significant. Eventually they got rid of it because of the legal difficulties of it. But having my own children in the school really was a benefit. You know, I had my son in my classroom and he was an ass. But I was able to, you know, be there for him and lead him through that. But still, I had both my daughters there as well. And so being able to spend more time with them and be very aware of their education was a benefit for me. So I don't mind investigating this very slowly. So anybody else have a comment or question about this?
It's a benefit depending on the day.
Yeah. If you're a parent, you know that.
Yeah.
I had both my boys in my classroom too, and one worked out well and the other.
Yeah, I pointed out my son one day. It was a very difficult class. It was 12 boys and 2 girls, and the boys were not easy boys. But I pointed at him, said, "You know what, young William, you're the only one in this room that I can legally beat. So let's just pull it together." That had no phase on him whatsoever. That didn't work at all. Curriculum approval process. Sort of, I think Angie covered a lot of the process. I think, you know, one question would be, because this is a funding issue, at what stage would this be brought? Where is the board in this process? I guess that's one question I have. And if anyone else has any questions, they can chime in.
My question would be, where does the board want to be in the process?
Yeah, I guess. Okay, let me take a step back because we do have new board members. Okay, and I'd like to congratulate all of us for having a new superintendent. But in the past, there was a feeling that the board had a feeling that things were done and then we were told about them after the fact. Okay, so as a board member who has gone through the history and other boards, this is not just me, there's that fear of that still happening. And we just want to make sure that we are working collaboratively with the school SU to move things forward. So Angie's question is a really honest question. Where do we want to fit in when it comes to new programs and new curriculum? Does anybody have something they want to add? Elizabeth and Rebecca, is that you next to Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Okay.
I joined the board when we were in the process of adopting Eureka. And also, Wheatley.
Yeah.
And there was we were involved in that process. And I felt really, at the time, I felt really inspired about, the idea of having kids at Albert Bridge have the same curriculum as the kids in Windsor. And so they would actually, why wouldn't you send your kid to Windsor if we're all using the same curriculum and it advances beyond 8th grade? It was a very exciting prospect to me, and I trumpeted it wherever I went. And so I urge you to consider involving the board in your discussions and not that we have to have extra meetings, not that we have to do extra stuff, but I urge you to consider involving the board in the decision-making process. That's my first comment, and then I'll come back. Can I ask more questions? Am I gonna be able to ask more questions after?
Elizabeth, you have the floor right now.
Okay. I also wondered whether, so that was why I asked for this to be on the board, on the agenda for tonight. I also wondered, when you consider, you said that one of your considerations was the equity standards currently, or the equity standards currently included in the recommendations from Act 1 to the State Board of Education. And I wondered what kind of an equity lens, like formalized equity lens, you use when you look at an ELA or math curriculum.
Before anyone answers that, I want to point out that that is a unusually difficult question to answer, and
It's not. If you have a formalized lens you're using, then you say, here's the lens that we're using. If you don't have a formalized lens that you're using, you should have one.
Right. So Elizabeth, I'm just opening up a window that if the administration wants to take a time to create an organized answer, then that's fine. But if any of them want to jump in, that's fine as well. Right here, right now, I want to make sure that the administration is comfortable with saying, I'd like to get back to you on that. Okay. Give me some time to organize it so I can present this in an intelligent way. That's the only reason I threw that out there, Elizabeth. It is a great question that you're asking. And I want everyone, and I'd like an answer, but I'd like a well thought out answer.
I have an answer. After that, I just want to point out that I said that that's language from the education quality standards. The words they use, and I don't have it right on my screen, and I don't have it committed to memory, but the word anti-racist, diverse, whatever that is language right from the education quality standards. Now, funny you should ask that question about the lens, because Christine and I met with, as she stated earlier, with Mary, and we were talking about how do we have these discussions with staff, and how do we make the conversation about equity, just the conversation we have, in every aspect of the work that we do. And we were using the Equity Lens tool that the Vermont Principals Association, the Vermont AOE has on their website. So I think as the faculty become more adept at that, at asking those questions, because I would imagine part of the work of the equity, of bringing the equity audit to fruition, or the recommendations to fruition, would be helping our faculty also be able to look at their curriculum materials, which are often developed and chosen by them. Like, we might give them a program, but they would add in their own things and embellish it, but they would learn how to ask themselves those questions to be more reflective on from an equity standpoint on the materials that they're choosing.
Thank you.
So, you would?
I have just a simple question, and I'm sure I must have missed it earlier, but who's on the committee that decides we need a pilot, that we need new ELA? I can understand the math, but how did that come about?
So that decision was made because we recognized that during the pandemic, that our language arts curriculum was all over the place. That there was no equity across the supervisory union.
Who's the we?
The curriculum office, the principals, various teachers. We were unable to hand a brand new teacher, a teacher new to our district, a program. We have materials in a drive that we can give them access to, but it's not the same as handing them a program that's complete. Our English language arts program was awesome. The Wheatley was not a curriculum. It was a theme-based outline, basically. Then we had foundations for teaching for our phonics. And what were the other pieces? We didn't have, there was not a vocabulary program with that. There was not a writing component to the Wheatley. So there were various pieces that the Wheatley never did that, a couple of years ago, I had teachers requesting writing programs. So we started looking at writing programs, and then it morphed into
So
looking at the
usually comes
ELA.
from the bottom up.
So,
Yeah.
This, I feel like very much came from teachers requesting a program.
Good.
And that's not true in all our schools, though, mind you.
Yeah.
So,
I want to touch base, Angie, I think you answered that very well. Rebecca had a question, if she still has a question, and then I'd like to have Beth.
Weigh in. Well, I think you answered some of my question, but it's similar to what Nancy asked. I was wondering, who is on this curriculum team that decides, and what is the process? Now, I also want to sort of support what Bill said, and I think that the board should be involved in the curriculum process. And I say that because as a teacher, as a guidance counselor for close to 20 years, I remember curriculum coming to teachers, and lots of times, it's like, oh, here we go again, a new curriculum, and they would change like every 3 years. Many times staff did not have the input. And so one of my frustrations, and Larry may remember in the budget conversations we were having, is I'm saying, well, how long did they have this program, and now they're moving to a new program? And so that gets lost. And I think it's really important information, especially when you are looking at budget and saying, well, this has only been around for a couple of years. And so I think it is important to be part of that conversation, because, I've lived it, I've seen it. And on the other hand, teachers weren't always very happy when all of a sudden we have a new curriculum that we're going to be working on. But if there is that conversation where there is that input from more people, I think that maybe at the end, when we decide, okay, this is the curriculum, this is the pilot, these are the folks that have been involved in making these decisions, it'll be a little bit smoother. But I do have questions, and I know that there needs to be a pilot in some areas just for improvement alone. I mean, we can't stay, but just for improvement, to continue to grow. But, yeah, how that process happens is so important. And not only to, for the board, but I think for the community. Because I think if anyone gets lost in this, it's the parents. The board probably can grasp some of this a little bit easier, but it's the parents who really are like, okay, where are they going now with my child? So I think it is an important piece for the board to be involved in and engaged in and informed of. Meg, your turn.
Beth? And,
Thanks.
hold on, Colleen,
Sorry.
can you make sure everything's okay? I have to run up to make sure that my 7-year-old isn't still listening to Harry Potter. Okay, I'll be back in 2 minutes.
Yeah, I can't say I agree with a lot of those statements around board involvement in curriculum decisions. That really seems like a solid line stepping over when our job is policy. I want to be informed in the sense of like, I feel fully informed on what's going on with the math curriculum, how it's being moved forward, who's reviewing what, and great. I am a professional educator and I do not feel it's my place as a board member to be saying, oh, you shouldn't go with this curriculum or you should go with this curriculum. That does not seem like a board decision whatsoever, in my mind. It's very much, I want to know if things are changing. I want to hear the background of why. But I really don't think we can say yay or nay toward curriculum change in that sense. That doesn't seem like if it's something going against a policy, like it's a blatantly racist curriculum, then yeah, I think it goes against a policy. But if it's not going against a policy, then that is not our job. We do not dictate curriculum, we dictate policy. So I would just be really, really clear on where we stand in that as we move forward with curriculum decisions.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Beth. And I think, I feel that Angie's point there right off the bat, what role do we want to play, is ripe for more discussion as a board. Because there is that fine line of, what our role is and how much we want to be involved. Any other discussion? Because I think we have a couple policies. Davis?
Yeah, I think maybe the commonality that I'm hearing between the perspectives on this is that whether we're saying the board is inserting ourselves into it or whether we're, not. I feel like there's probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is there general agreement that we want to understand what's happening with the curriculum process and just have a little bit more of a window into it?
Yes.
But not necessarily from a decision-making perspective?
Yeah.
Okay, I know we just lost Elizabeth, which is unfortunate, but
There is a policy, curriculum development and coordination in place, which is pretty, the supervisory union board shall be responsible for establishing a supervisory union-wide curriculum by either developing the curriculum or assisting member school districts to develop it jointly. It's pretty broad.
And the budget piece is ours.
And the budget piece is yours for sure.
yeah.
So it sounds like we want to be very mindful that we are keeping the board informed all along the way.
Sure.
I have to applaud the department because we didn't have a curriculum adoption process in place before this year.
Mhm.
We did not. So
Okay.
it's new and evolving, and we know we've gone through it, and we've talked about some adjustments to that process already. So it's exciting, it's necessary, and I hear you, Rebecca, because I was in the classroom for many years. This curriculum is from 2015, I believe, or when it was adopted.
In 2015.
2015, so it's time. It's not culturally responsive in many ways. It's not, these are
It's
new.
not evidence-based,
Right.
it's not scientific.
So
I think
it's
most
time-based.
curriculum review processes are 5 years at the latest to kind of really, it doesn't mean you adopt something new, it just
Review it.
means you review it, you look at it, you make sure that it is still responsive and that it's, you know, been updated and that it's research-based still, because, you know, everybody's coming out with new things all the time. You know, the science changes all the time, our understanding of brain development changes all the time. So we want to make sure that we're also acclimating to that while being mindful of, we can't do everything and we can't change everything every year, you know, like.
Trying to get on a cycle.
Curriculum, right, yeah.
Okay.
Bill, can you hear still?
I can see. I'm moving on. C22. Student athletics clubs and activities. Has everyone had a chance to read this? Anyone have any comments about it? It's pretty boilerplate, but it's. I think it's an important policy in that it does lay out. I think we had something. I'd have to look in the past. That's something that touched upon this, but it was not this in depth.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I've had a chance to read it, and I agree. I think it is pretty in-depth. And I think it's great in the way that it really covers clubs that are monitored by the students themselves, clubs that are monitored by the school. If someone wanted to have a club, the question, who would they address, you know, that and who would monitor that? I think it does a really nice job of explaining.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially at the end, it really leaves a lot of process creation for administration, deciding a student's eligibility with regards to education equity, where the principal comes in, when a youth athlete can no longer participate, so forth and so on, for health concerns. So I think I encourage everyone to go through it, and I think we call this a first reading.
Yeah.
Davis?
Yeah, the only comment I would add is that, you know, in addition to what you were saying about there being some flexibility in there around how, you know, building administrators are interpreting this and building procedures to go with the policy, I appreciated how student-centric it was. You know, it really, and I think that's something that's worth codifying in these kind of policies. It's great that it's a boilerplate and we don't need to fine-tune it too much to have that focus. But I think, and particularly, and I think Christine, you had mentioned, like, there was some kind of topical reason that this was timely, at least in the in Mount Escutney School District. But I think that the focus on there being these clubs that are for students, that are supported by teachers, building that framework, and then codifying how, if you want to have community participation, which I think is incredibly important because we all want to be building these strong bridges between community organizations and our student organizations, but really setting some boundaries and guidelines around that. Yeah. Just so it's not a big open question in gray areas. There are some it's a policy that points pretty directly towards the procedures we would set. So I think this is fantastic.
Thank you, Davis. A22, is that next? Let me look at it. Yes. Second reading.
I have a comment. Elizabeth.
Okay.
We have a whole policy regarding student homelessness that I think was passed last week or last month after I left the meeting, but I think that we should add housing status onto the list of groups that shall not be discriminated against.
In paragraph
Or,
3.
or characteristics or whatever.
They're notified, okay.
Yeah, it does not discriminate on the basis of and housing status. I think, I'd agree with that.
Okay.
I do too.
I think that's a very intelligent addition.
And Bill, I think this is actually our third and maybe final reading of this, because we had a second reading in February.
Let me look back.
This says it's a second reading. Is this wrong?
I think we didn't get to the February reading because you were
Yeah.
interviewing superintendent.
Oh, is that what it was?
And then we,
Yeah.
and then we came and
Yep.
then we didn't get to all of them last month because we were over time. So I think that's a mistake on Laura's part.
Yeah.
We were intending to read it then. I don't think we did.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, I think this is the only second time I remember reading it.
We'll bring it back.
Beth?
Actually, was just listening to something on the radio today that they are trying to have a new protected class of individuals, and those are like differently bodied people, so people of all sizes as being, and so there was just a report talking about how they're working toward making that as a protected class because there's no rules around discriminating on with overweight people, and that you can fire someone or put limitations on their employment status on their weight and have that is totally legal. So that's something to consider that we could add to it.
Beth, what terminology?
I don't know. I forget what it was. It was an NPR story. I can look it up. It was just on NPR this afternoon.
Weightism, ageism, I've heard it.
I don't know what it was. It was almost like differently body formed or something like it was. I forget what it was.
Or something?
But I can look it up, but it's just something to consider that I was
Yeah,
just thought of today when I was listening to the radio.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that's a good use.
Okay. Second reading. Any other discussion on this?
Statement, weight bias.
And our third reading for proficiency, D1 proficiency-based graduation requirements. Let's see, where did I open it up?
And Bill, this is the one where I think on our first reading, we made that decision in the second paragraph that the WSE SU will not use credits, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Will not use credits as part of our graduation requirement.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that we can't gather credits.
Yeah, and that was, I remember we had a really good discussion about it,
Yes.
saying it is a very narrow description of how we are not using credits, which is not to say that we are not using credits at all as got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there any additional discussion to this? I think we've had some healthy discussion, but if anyone has anything they wanted to add, or questions from new board members are always welcome. Okay.
Yeah.
Items for action.
Wait, I'm sorry, before we go to items for action, Bill,
Sure.
I just have two comments that I wanted to make in the area of policy. One was a request for us to go back, have among our next policies to review be our firearms policy, which hasn't been touched since 2019. And really, I read it today and it's quite arcane.
Okay. I think that's a wonderful idea.
And the second one was, I also was looking at the policy on homeless students, which I've left the meeting too early to be able to speak to last month, but I noticed at the end of that and at the end of, bless you,
Thank you.
quite a few of our policies call for procedures to be written.
Working on it.
And I wondered whether we could ask you to come back to us on a regular basis with procedures that have been completed.
Yes, we have, I think you all have access to the spreadsheet where I'm linking them, the draft, but I can bring, I mean, we've got them almost done, not quite. So I had Lori go through every policy and pull out where it says the superintendent or designee will create, procedures and have just been slowly chipping away. So I'm happy to,
That would be, I would really appreciate
Yeah.
that.
So Christine, I think maybe as not that I want to add to the administrative report, but maybe if you spread them out and do one set of procedures, SU meeting.
That's a great idea. The goal is that, you know, the ones that aren't just purely administrative will be on the website for full transparency to all, everybody. So once I share them with you and we get that approval, we can just start putting them in the portal somehow. Yeah, that's a great idea, Bill.
And Bill, I just.
I'm not sure we have to actually. Christine, you didn't mean that we would have to approve them.
No, the board doesn't approve them.
Right,
No.
I didn't think so. Okay,
You just-
Davis?
You have to look at them, make comments.
Yeah, I just realized
Or know that they exist.
Yeah.
the comment before and to close on the proficiency-based graduation requirements, I just wanted to kind of throw out there for the record again, because I know that we have had some kind of spirited discussion on this board and with community members. It's just worth noting again that this is a requirement that is coming down from the state level, correct?
It's already down. Yeah.
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 I think it's just worth a reminder because I understand it is a pretty big, again, it's another kind of shift in mental model that is coming with this higher level policy, and we are doing our best job to translate what we are required to do into something that is actionable and is going to be implementable.
Yeah, the state wanted us to do it in, 6 months or 2 years? I can't remember what timeline they gave to schools, but it was not doable. So I'm hoping by the end of this decade, that it will be a solid process, especially with what the state's supposed to be doing to assist us. So.
Yeah, and I think that's why I brought up that very narrow definition here is just to be very clear, we are not doing away with credits right now. We are keeping something that is familiar to people, to our parents, our students, our faculty, while starting to build up the process of saying they exist, but that is not the criterion by which we are measuring our graduation requirements.
Besides the fact that because we are a border SU, it would be a complete disaster when a student moves from, as a sophomore, moves from Windsor to Lebanon, and New Hampshire is a credit-based state. If those data points weren't in his transcript, it would cause such chaos that, okay.
That's really good. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you, Davis, for bringing that up. Okay, third reading, items for action, and items for action also includes the proficiency base. But first, I wanted to do approval for the equity and diversity coordinator position. So I will take a motion to, wouldn't really be a point, would it? To approve the hiring of
Tracy Price.
Tracy Price as the Windsor Southeast Supervisory Union coordinator for equity and diversity. Is that the exact title? Or?
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay. Davis?
So moved. Davis.
Second, Nancy.
Is there any discussion? Well, I'd like to say congratulations to the administration for finding a candidate and hiring a candidate. We'll go around. Colleen, how do you?
Aye.
Nicole?
Hi.
Beth?
Aye.
Davis?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Elizabeth,
Aye.
Rebecca,
Aye.
Anne Marie,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Jamie. Jamie here. Okay, and I am an I.
Megan, you forgot Megan.
Megan. Megan, how do you vote?
We couldn't quite hear you.
Thank you. And let me put Megan in my list here. Insert row above, not below.
Welcome, Megan.
Welcome, Megan. A22, notice of non-discrimination.
Do you want to bring that one back, Bill, for a third read? That's the one we talked about.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
I do
Okay.
want to bring that back. D1, proficiency-based graduation requirements. Do I have a motion to approve this?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? As Davis pointed out, there has been some robust discussion on this. I think we've come a long way. Megan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay. Mark,
Aye.
Anne Marie,
Aye.
Rebecca,
Aye.
Elizabeth,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Beth,
Aye.
Nicole,
Aye.
Colleen,
Aye.
and I am an I. Okay, that passes. And we're down to setting the next agenda.
Woohoo. Bill, it's 8:17.
Oh my
It's
goodness.
8:17.
8:18.
Bill, I think on the next, or for the next agenda, we need to talk about replacing Amy on the VSBA board.
Yes, I have contacted them, and I've got the process of what needs to happen. So I agree with you.
Did we have any other like liaison appointments on this level, or is that all on local level? And do we still have a wink or something?
There's a town clerk.
We do have to do,
That's-
it's on our next agenda.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I'm good.
I'd just like to quickly say that if those of you who are still at home, if you could possibly come, you'll really like it. This was my first time in person since the pandemic, and it's really nice.
Yeah. My wife will be home. At least I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did make an attempt. The only person that I could call, because this is a long night, was my son Bill, and he quite conveniently came up with a really good excuse. VSB board, there's something that, do we want to have a discussion as a board during a meeting about, after a month, what our role would be in curriculum development? Just to touch base with it, not necessarily to come up with a decision, but to voice our opinion about after a month of sitting on it. Does anyone have any objection to that?
I think it's a great idea to have a discussion about it.
Right.
Yeah, likewise.
Board role and curriculum adoption process.
Yes.
Okay. And we'll do, Bill, I've got firearms as a first read. I'll find that one.
Yep.
Second read for the student activities, and a third read for the notice of non-discrimination. that what you have?
Yep.
Okay. And I'll put item for action, we'll probably be ready for A22, non-discrimination to adopt it, okay?
Is there anything time-based? Because we're coming up to May.
We'll have Larry's end of year financial report next
Right.
month.
Not next month, not the end of the year financial.
You want,
report. It'll be the finance and operations report,
Finance and
not the
operations,
financials.
right.
Okay.
Finance and
And I will
operations.
have an item for action. We close the E-rate, RFP bid process, which I'll explain in my report, but there'll just need to be a motion on that. We'll call it E-rate motion. And I'll have it for you, Bill. I'll send it to you via email before the meeting.
Okay.
To be ready.
Elizabeth has her hand up,
I've got
Bill.
my hand up, Bill.
Okay. Yeah. You're not always in front, Elizabeth.
Is there, do we plan to have a, discussion about board goals or a board retreat where we could talk about our goals for the next year? So that our individual boards can tie those goals to the SU goals? Does that make sense? What?
Yeah. I don't think it should be next meeting, but I
No,
think
but-
at some point, I think that's a great idea to sort of tie that all together, and that might be an early summer meeting.
So we could talk about dates next month.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Is there like a board retreat that would be on?
It would be a board retreat. I don't know if the SU board has typically done that in the past.
Yeah, we usually have it in May, actually.
Okay. So that'll be an item for action, determine date for SU board
Yep.
retreat. Okay.
Because we didn't do it during the pandemic, but we always had
Yeah.
a nice dinner at Weathersfield.
Oh.
In their cafeteria.
Excellent.
Yeah. And if we, one thing on my mind is, and it may fit in well with the board retreat, is to have even a short presentation by the food department on how things are going. And if they're cooking and want to attend, that might be a good sort of review on their perspective, how things are going, anything that's missing, do they need anything else? Beth?
Yeah, and I think I was just actually having a similar thought, and I'm not sure when we'll hear about universal meals for next year or not. So I think I would love to hear, like, if we're not doing universal meals, what's our plan moving forward? Because we as a board, we could budget and make universal meals just for our district if we really wanted to.
Yeah.
As well. But
Or even come up with a different criteria
Mhm.
to addition to.
Yeah, but I don't know
being-
statewide when that decision's being made. I don't know.
Yeah.
When that is, but I think
Yeah.
having a plan in place, and I'd love to understand that so we can not be
Yeah.
caught off guard
Yeah.
and support it.
And I really want a summary about how our food director feels that things are going.
Beth, the final decision, it passed through the House, it's in the Senate, and the decision should be made in the next week or two. It has to be made in the next week or two.
Oh, great. Then we'll know by next meeting.
Yep.
Not necessarily unless if the governor vetoes it.
Oh, quiet down, Bill. I know he's not really in favor of it. He said, why should we be paying for wealthy children's meals? I'm like, oh, how has he not gotten it after all these years? But anyway.
Hey, Bill, just so you know, part of Larry's report will be food service next month.
Right.
And if you want follow-up from Craig on that, we're happy to,
Yeah.
do that as
But
well.
I think after the school year's done and or near the end, if he could just kind of summarize how he thought the year went. Not a whole lot, but I like hearing from him at least once a year kind of keep us in touch and seeing if there's anything that we can do as a board to support him and his crew.
Okay, I've got it.
Okay.
I'd be happy to do that.
Christine, I have a question.
Sure.
Is Monday and, you know, Kate and Colleen are online, but is Monday a good day for board members to go in and, I wasn't sure if it
Oh,
was a
just
good.
in general on
just in-
Monday?
Well, yeah, go in and have lunch with the kids or, come in during the lunchtime.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sometimes Mondays are rough.
Adulte's free on Wednesdays in Heartland.
Yeah, you should come Wednesday.
In any ESU.
And any
In any
building.
building in the ESU, Wednesdays,
Wednesday?
Yeah.
free for adults.
Davis, you didn't know that, huh?
Okay, so.
Oh,
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, maybe Wednesday, forget about Monday, you know?
Over the next couple weeks, it will be a little interesting in the buildings because we're doing the testing. And so
Testing,
scheduling
Okay.
is all over
Messed
the
up.
place and
Yep.
it's not a typical day over the next several weeks. So just be mindful.
The Wednesday thing is a benefit
Yeah.
for the
For
last
the
year and a
staff.
half.
That's lovely.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
The staff really, really appreciate it.
I can.
Okay.
Okay,
Anyway, so
Um,
any day,
I have one other thing. I'm wondering if the other board chairs of Heartland and Weathersfield mind is in my role as board chair if I come to one of your meetings, and just be there as a public member. Okay. If I just show up and I'm like, hey, okay.
I don't think they're allowed to stop you, Bill.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but yeah,
The more the merrier.
I just don't want to because it's going to have to be planning on my part, and so, meaning like at 6, I say to my wife, I'm going to go to Heartland to go join a meeting. That's the amount of planning, and so without asking
You
you,
have to say that at 5:30.
okay.
We start our meetings at 6.
Oh, okay. Good to know. Okay, thank you. I will take a motion to adjourn this meeting. 8:28.
good job, Bill.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
I'll move.
Second.
So move. Second.
Okay. Do we want to just do a voice vote? All in favor, say aye.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Have a great night.
Good night.